In regards to the current political and geoclimate of the world, I'm not even going to begin to act like I'm surprised. If there's one thing I've learned from history other than this country's constant need for leadership, with fascist regimes, tailgating, tax write-offs, and NDA inclined freak-offs to blow off the steam of pretending they aren't making unethical decisions in broad daylight, is that this country is ran by men who are byproducts of the male loneliness epidemic. Now, I can go on about how this epidemic is derived from the appendages of the patriarchy and so forth on. That it's generational and it is something that is inescapable. I mean, because gender aside, it's something that we all have the tendency to experience. The real elephant that needs to be addressed is, at this point, my demographic and beyond are quite aware of it. There's no need to point fingers. There's no need to obstruct the rights of women. Please don't do that. There's no need to start wars. Oh my gosh, please don't do that. The fact that I can literally name historical timelines where none of the shit wouldn't have happened if our leaders had good interpersonal skills, the ability to empathize and the proper use of detachment, because knowing when to accept is just a part of having good emotional intelligence, damn it. The First World War, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. My God, the spectrum of irrationality to the scale of emotional despondence between these two. Kaiser was hitting the red button like every time, while Tsar was breaking the levels of I just don't give a fuck. I'm clocking in, and after I'm done, I'm going the fuck home. The Vietnam War, Johnson's inability to listen to the concerns of American citizens, Nixon being the biggest fucking gaslighter and responding to the general public by pretending the phone isn't ringing. It's just evident that cognitive dissonance is something that has become habitual, generational. We can confidently say generational. We allow ourselves to revel in our own psychosis, procreate with our proclivities and birth so many microcosms of trauma, stigmas, and shame. And it's all because they have not learned to take their own emotion at face value. Or worse, they do, and they still go to the extreme measures to express how hurt they are. So what's the solution? All right, we have plenty of podcasts. We have AI companionship at our disposal. I'm sure that's going well. We have feminists at the forefront demanding accountability from men, and it's not as progressive as people think it is. I think the answer is obviously, methodologies that help regulate emotions without self-harm or harming one another. But what's missing is the psychology of fluidity, because everyone thinks their method is the good old tried and true. One of them will always be through intimately experiencing a dynamic character through a TV show or film, at least for me. And there's a character I feel is just perfect, surrounding the epidemic of male loneliness. And his name is Isaac from Castlevania. His journey, I want to say, is quite quintessential to those who weigh in between being misanthropic and wanting to experience companionship. His journey definitely makes up the complex of men who just naturally have an allegiance to be led by other men. On the other end of the spectrum, this is a character that no matter how far of a reach he made to humanity, he was always met with the back of someone else's hand. It's important to note by the end of this case study, his story is a representation of how you don't need to manipulate or conquer someone in order to be seen or respected, in spite of him literally doing all of those things in the show. Now, Isaac's origin story in this adaptation is very specific. In the games, he's not depicted as African, native, okay? He's white. And honestly, I'm glad they chose to diversify, the cast, because I find his origins as a slave to be very significant to this topic. Because yes, I'm speaking to every demographic of man. We've all been indoctrinated by the patriarchy regardless of class and ethnicity. But most Black men, specifically as a demographic, have to deal with that, in addition to this genetic predisposition of experiencing slave and master dynamics. And this isn't just in regards to dynamics that they experience with both women and men, but the perpetual habit of assuming the void of course. You have to think of this learned behavior, this learned habit, the historical response to their emotions, or even emotional outbursts being a sign of retaliation and that always had consequences, or choosing to bide their time until, unbeknownst to them, they die of some improbable causes that are inherently due to refraining their emotions. So with the demographic of Black men, there is a bigger chance of an impression being made when it comes to embodying the concept of power. They develop Stockholm syndrome. They start to look at their oppressors as inspiration, or someone to learn from that gives them that leeway to climb the same ladder that leads to a superficial status of high earned respect that's just based on fear tactics. This is a common tactic or mindset. I mean, the inclusion of every other demographic male implores this toxic masculinity of needing to be in control. And I mean in almost every facet of the word. Isaac becomes an example of that. He succeeds in taking his power back after he kills his master. But you are shown that he never really escapes the dynamic. Okay, you are instead exposed to different archetypes of men that are bred from this complex. You have the silent warrior archetype, disciplined, hardworking, doesn't complain. He's used to carrying burdens without asking for help. He doesn't see the point in talking about feelings until the weight gets unbearable. People admire him but don't really see him. The exiled rebel, anti-authority, intense, often self-destructs. He's often at odds with the world, right? He sees its flaws, but instead of finding kindreds, he isolates in anger or addiction. People find him intimidating or exhausting, even though he craves connection. The abandoned son, emotionally wounded, often from early loss or neglect. He's never fully learned to trust or attach. Friendship feels conditional and intimacy feels dangerous. He may sabotage relationships, expecting abandonment before it even happens. And finally, the lone wolf, the hermit, intelligent, introspective, independent. He values solitude but lacks a tribe. Over time, his self-reliance turns into disconnection. He may long for deeper bonds but fears rejection or feels misunderstood. Throughout every season, you see Isaac traverse these archetypes fluidly. You would think he's insufferable for the way that he speaks about his disdain for humanity, but honestly, look around you, you see he hadn't really told not one lie about them. He gets recruited by Dracula, and he's just like, fuck it, let's exterminate them all. Like, why not? Even if I were to eventually be killed by your own hand. Okay, his disdain has reached so far that he's clearly displaying signs of suicidal ideation. Okay, he's as fuck it we ball we're ever going to see in the show. Like, I promise you that. But of course, it doesn't go as planned, right? And Isaac is left abandoned and left to traverse the earth by his lonesome once more. Like a Capricorn, faced with the forward lessons by Saturn, each trial and tribulation he's faced has been a steady incline on a mountain that constantly either validated his perspective or challenged it. Each rest stop in exchange with a stranger who's shown acts of kindness, who shared words of wisdom that made him feel malleable and mutable. And every time he stepped foot back on the mountain, back on the journey towards reaching the pinnacle of understanding the human experience, he was casually met with opposition for either his appearance, a little bit racist, his aura, or his gift as a mirror, who metaphorically deflects their insecurity and their own struggles with the dynamics of power. And it was unfortunately, figuratively, and literally a battle every time. I can understand how and why it's very easy to succumb to being a misanthrope or just belligerent in anger, intentional and being alone and separated from society. I can understand why for most men the response to any power dynamics is to just build more testosterone than they ever have before. Working out, which is a genuine dopamine release, in response to stress. I get it. However, I've seen too many examples of them utilizing this outlet as a rite of passage to just flex and beat somebody's eyes.
So I got to win, break bread with the enemy. No matter how many cats I break bread with them. Rick, Summer?
Which, for the sake of this video essay, I'm not going to support that. It's funny. It's honestly, no, I'm going to contradict myself. And it's probably why I understand how some men just genuinely get worse.
Like, man eat steak, pork, chitlin. Woman eat salad. That's just what it is. I want to watch football game, eat food. Women, they supposed to be loving us. You feel what I'm saying? Man,
Are you married by chance?
Nah, man, I ain't never had a girlfriend.
Throughout the show, Isaac had no issues being exact in his revenge. But as aforementioned, the random acts of kindness through his journey made him challenge his own ideologies towards feeling the need to just be even, or better yet, superior. Okay, so Isaac had this incredible ability to reincarnate souls from hell into the form of demons. And there was one reincarnate who lived his life as a Greek philosopher before his execution. Through this conversation with one another was imparted the nuance of freedom. See, this philosopher was in a time where being autonomous in their beliefs had its repercussions. The Christian regime had strong political influence during the early 4th century and onward. So when you think of philosophers like Socrates, who had been executed for being inquisitive or being objective, you can imagine that this demon, who once human, had suffered the same fate. In a larger context, I see this starkly related to how a lot of men feel persecuted for living the truth, even if it seems otherly or against societal expectations on how a man is supposed to be perceived. Now, I blame that on the socio-cultural impact of the word masculinity and femininity, which I talk about in the essay that I've posted on Medium. If you're ever curious about that, Isaac's perspective is then further challenged after meeting a captain of this ship. They both bargain over boundaries and what's needed from one another in exchange, because it's so obvious at this point. Isaac and his whole army of demons is just covered in blood. Clearly doesn't mind bloodshed. The captain and the safety of both him and the crew members in exchange for a safe passage to Wisteria, where Isaac's target lies. Isaac, however, gets more than what he's bargained for, okay, because he is also imparted wisdom from the captain in a way that gets him to sort of rethink his motivation around wiping out the existence of the human race. The captain assures him of this world's cruelty, as well as his own. He's not a man without sin either. And that maybe, we all deserve to die. But maybe we all deserve a chance to be better as well. He proceeds to say that killing everyone would end cruelty, yes, but a world of kindness, humility, and love would be gone as well. Bars, which is fantastic. Everybody's a fucking philosopher and poet in this show, and so many minuscule ways. It's beautiful. I'm not gonna lie. Why is this understanding pivotal to those who are experiencing the epidemic? Simple, because there is historical context to most men, not all, that have a tendency to create self-destructive behavior or cause destruction, due to unhealthy ways of emotional resolve. The center of this epidemic is rejection, which this character has faced numerous times through his journey. And let's be fucking real, man. We've seen the horrors of what people are capable of when they're faced with rejection. Account phishing, revenge porn, stalking, abuse, murder. There's not enough etiquette. There's not enough rallying behind the importance of proper rehabilitation and reformatting it to keep up with the intricacies of trauma. Like Isaac's journey and others, it definitely brings context to the saying, the child that does not feel loved by the village will burn it down. In the same breath, I can give a maxim that's even more important, even better, if we're going to be quite honest. A good intro relationship is how you have an even better one with society. As aforementioned, you have to be fluid in different methodologies when you're dealing with this sense of emptiness or longing. I know a lot of people probably feel overwhelmed with woke propaganda, and it's no different from the fascist regimes that are out there. Okay, both sides are profiting. There's Let's be honest now. But there's power and choice in choosing what and how something can influence you, because we're all impressionable. We just have to be curious, intentional, and objective about what it is that we consume and how we digest it. And if that becomes overwhelming, you know, we have history at our fingertips that presents itself as proof on what methodologies have worked and what hasn't. History doesn't lie, and that's why I love it. Clearly, I made this essay because I love talking to myself, right? Um, so anybody who's viewed it outside of myself, I'm gonna say thank you. If you watched, uh, this started off as a soliloquy, a fluid train of thought, that then turned into an essay and now a video. And yeah, feel free to engage.